Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions.
I was living, with my family back in LA. I ended up getting a job as a surf instructor in Santa Monica. So I was teaching now surf in Santa Monica, volunteering for the Santa Monica Fire Department, going to school to become a firefighter. And then I also got a job as a group fitness instructor at Base Camp Fitness because I had to pay the bills.
Yeah.
So I wanted to get out of my family's home.
Yeah.
And then eventually I moved into a studio in Santa Monica, and I was doing all those things: surf instructor, fitness instructor, volunteer, and then going to school and really pursuing that. I got my EMT license, and it was doing that for about, I would say, like 2 to 3 years. And then long story short, I started getting more involved in the fire service. And I was just like, I just saw trends. Like a lot of the guys, to each their own. I just realized it wasn't for me.
Okay.
A lot of overtime, and you hear that there's high divorce rates, and just some of the traditions I didn't align with. And so I was like, after 3 years of pursuing it, I was like, you know what, this is not for me. And then I ended up just continuing to work I grew within the surf company, and then was really enjoying the fitness training. And then I kind of got in a slump again. I was like tired of paying the high rents in Santa Monica because I was so used to paying $230 up in Chico. Right now I was paying like over $1,000 in Santa Monica.
Yeah.
And paycheck to paycheck. I was rarely in that studio because I was always working. I only slept there 6 hours a day, if that. And then I was out and about all the time. So then I bought a van, and I converted a 2016 Mercedes Sprinter into a tiny home that I ended up living in for a year and a half, being a personal trainer, surf instructor, and just going up and down the coast of California, surfing my heart out. So, and then that's kind of my post Disney experience.
Okay. So you do that, and you're in a Sprinter van that you've converted, right?
With my dad.
Yeah. And so you're going up and down the coast, you're surfing, you're doing your thing, right? What happens then?
Yeah, so a few things. So that was an incredible experience, met amazing people, great connections. I started a brand called Bueno, which is all about sharing that good energy and insight. One thing I didn't mention is that around my mid-20s, 26, is when I really started reading books, and reading books really changed my life. And so I just started, devouring books. I just so curious, like kind of like you said earlier before we started this podcast. I was always fascinated, like, why are some people happy or have a great attitude or super successful, and or they have less but they're happier than people who have it all. And then why are some people like struggling, in pain, depressed, all these negative things? I was just so curious. I was also like, why do I think the way I think? Am I operating at my best? Like, could there be more? Am I seeing everything? Do I have blind spots? So I just loved reading. I loved the takeaways I was getting. I was like, oh, I do that. I can change that behavior. I can add this to my vocabulary. My vocabulary started changing. People started noticing. Even my family or friends from LA, they're like, oh, you sound different. You sound so educated now. They were making fun of me for my language and my vocabulary changing. But I just love to learn and grow. And so fast forward, as I was growing and learning so much about psychology, human behavior, and like business, I was like, I want to be able to start something where I can share this good energy and insight, so other people can have similar breakthroughs in their lives. So
Mhm.
kind of started bueno. It was, and I started doing it through like coffee, just sharing. So it was before podcast, where just having a cup of coffee with people.
Mhm.
And I wish I would have interviewed all the conversations I've had in our
Mhm.
bueno coffee sessions, where I would just meet with people. I would give away free coffee. People would come to my van and we just have conversations. My favorite thing to do was just to meet people and hear their stories,
Mhm.
where they're from, how they got to where they started to where they're at today, just like you're
Mhm.
doing today.
Yeah.
And I would just do that consistently.
Yeah. It's fascinating, man.
Yeah. And just loved it. I love meeting people, talking to people. And then kind of fast forward, I get a call from one of my, she's like my second mom, my mentor. This family is like my role models. I always joke that if I could be half the family they are, I would be the happiest man in the world.
Mhm.
And I met them at the summer camp, because for 1 week of the summer, it's called family camp, where the parents get to come with the kids at the family camp and experience that as a whole family, kind of like the Disney cruise ship, but
Mhm.
a summer camp. Because usually it's just kids, it's family with their children. And I met them there years ago. She tried to recruit me then, like, oh, come help me with my nonprofit in Detroit. And but I was like, I still have 3 years of school left, and I'm from Southern California. I don't know if I can handle Detroit winters.
Right.
And so I finished college, did everything we just talked about, and then we always stayed in touch while I was living in my van. Also, I've done a lot. Another thing too is I was hit up by my summer camp. They're like, hey, you've done so much over the years, you've grown so much. Would you be interested in being a recruiter for the summer camp? I'm like, interesting. Tell me more. And then I was hearing it. Yeah, like basically, it's like you got to go to different college campuses all over California. We'll pay for your flights, travel, all that, hotel, food, blah blah blah. And I'm like, and I was living in my van. I was living in my van, so I was like, the wheels were spinning. Like this could be a
Mhm.
great opportunity. I was like, okay, well, let me ask you, like, could I have all those benefits, but you just pay me instead, and I'll just take my van everywhere. I'm actually living in
Mhm.
a van, a nice van,
Yeah. Why
and
not?
and why not? And they're like, "Oh my god, of course, amazing!" So it was like a win-win. I was able to get an incredible opportunity job, travel all over California, visiting different college campuses, recruiting the future camp counselors to this camp that I was very passionate about. And so I did that for, you know, probably for about like, yeah, like 2 semesters,
Mhm.
'cause the whole school year recruiting for the following summer, and that was incredible. So I got paid to live in my van, travel all over California, and just meet great people and interview them and give them cool jobs.
That's
So
cool.
I did that, and then as I was wrapping up that, I get a call from Trigger, who was one of the mothers that I met at this camp.
Mhm.
She was the founder of a nonprofit called Hummel Design in Detroit.
Mhm.
And what they do is they take donated furniture from the community, then they fully furnish and personalize people's homes who recently transitioned out of homelessness. So
Mhm.
it's like HDTV, but for people experiencing homelessness.
Right.
And it's incredible. She's like, Manny, just reaching out because I was actually in San Diego recruiting. I reached out to her. We caught up. She's like, Manny, I want to start a humble design here in San Diego.
Hmm.
It's like, I know you have a lot of experience in nonprofit.
Right.
You have experience in recruiting, you're passionate about serving. You're like, will you join me in helping me start Humble Design San Diego? And
Cool.
because I have so much admiration for this woman and her whole family, I'm like, absolutely. There's not a lot of people who will drop whatever I'm doing to go help. And I was very aligned with her and the mission. So I was like, I was ready to go like that day. She's like, no, Manny, we're not ready. We want to make sure we can raise enough funds to hire you properly.
Mhm.
Like, don't worry about it. Like, I can start today. And she's like, no, like, do your thing. About 2 weeks later, she gives me a call and she's like, we're ready. And I'm like, you got it. I'll be there in, you know, 2 weeks. And so that was my stint in traveling, working as a recruiter. That's what got me to San Diego.
Mhm.
And then we helped her start. It started with 2 employees. It was myself and this other guy named Esty. I was kind of like the director of operations,
Mhm.
and she was more of the funding, but we did everything kind of together, boots on the ground. And then Trigger was like, all right, like you need to raise $250,000. You need to hire movers. You need to hire designers. You need to find a warehouse, and you need to get a lot of furniture. I think this was like February. She's like,
Mhm.
And by September, because we're going to start filming a TV show. And I'm like, holy moly. So believe it or not, we were able to accomplish all of that in a short few months.
Wow.
And we got a warehouse. We got the funding, mostly from private donors here in San Diego, which is a blessing. We found somebody who would, give us a warehouse for cheap in National City. We did all sorts of marketing and lunch and learns and got a lot of furniture. And then then we did a TV show. So that's what moved me to San Diego. I worked for Humble Design for about 2 years, and other things I can tell you more, but I'll pause there. But that's where I was, and that's what got me down to San Diego, Humble Design.
So how long were you with Humble Design?
I was there for 2 years, and it was incredible. But the nonprofit world, what I realized, and again, during this time, I was still reading books. I love questions. And one thing I found myself in a position where I was like, I really love the nonprofit industry, but I feel like I'm about to be the client we're serving, because in the nonprofit, you don't get paid very much. Living in San Diego, at this time, I'd already gotten rid of the van because I couldn't afford the van and an apartment. Now that I knew that I was starting this nonprofit, Humble Design, I didn't really need the van. I wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't utilizing it. So I sold that, rented in PB, was working, helping to grow that. But I just found myself, like, my savings and everything was just dwindling. I was very passionate with what I was doing, but then the question that changed my life, I think, was Jack Welch. He says, like, is where you are now going to take you where you want to go? And then when I asked myself that question, the hard truth, the hard reality was, it's not. Where I want to go is pretty simple. I just want a better future for myself and my future family. And I want freedom, option, and choice.
Right.
And being a nonprofit, I wasn't going to get that. So, I didn't know what I wanted to do next, but I just knew I couldn't stay there.
Right.
So I had a tough conversation with my people that I admire. It was really hard. It was an identity crisis. I was a nonprofit guy for 10 years. So I was like, who am I? Like, what am I going to do and not be in the nonprofit world? I thought this was going to be my forever, and it was not. So a lot of reflection. Obviously, like, we tried to ask for like more money, but that just wasn't going to work, especially being such a young nonprofit here in San Diego. So I had to let that go. And the funny thing is, I went to Bali. I was like, you know what? I love surfing. I just need to get like mental clarity. So I went to Bali for just over 3 weeks to just avoid all distractions. And then I was like, my intention was, I'm going to go read and reflect, kind of figure out what I really want to do.
Right.
And it was filled with a lot of adventure. I did get some clarity. I brought books with me. And at the time, too, throughout this whole season of my 20s, I unfortunately adapted the bad habits. I didn't really have any role models financially. So I was always struggling financially throughout this entire time. I was always in debt. I was always just paycheck to paycheck, just like my parents.
Right.
And then I was just fed up. I'm like, I'm tired of being broke and in debt and just paycheck to paycheck. And I didn't have mentors, but I remember this quote, and I was like, if you don't have any mentors, the best place to start is a bookshelf. So I bought 6 financial literacy books, and I read them all. So I started reading financial literacy books. I learned how to budget. I learned how to, about assets and liabilities. Rich Dad Poor Dad. Rich Dad Poor Dad was a book that started. So Rich Dad Poor Dad, a few others, and then I was like, okay. And then I started seeing a common pattern. All these books is that a lot of the people that I admire and that were successful, they all had their hands in real estate. It's like, what is this real estate thing?
Amazing how that's a common thread, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So Rich Dad Poor Dad, and then all the books, they all mention real estate. So like, what is real estate? I found Bigger Pockets. Started listening to that podcast religiously, because a lot of it was like people telling stories like, hey, I'm a normal person who's, buying assets, getting passive income so I can have freedom, option, and choice. I'm like, that's exactly what I want.
Right.
And I believe them, these were normal people
Mm-hmm.
buying real estate, getting what I wanted. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, well, if they can do it, they're being super transparent and honest in these podcasts. It seems like the simple path or the easier path. And then it just clicked for me. That's what I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to do. I'm going to get into
Yeah.
real estate. So I came back. I knew I was going to do real estate. And so I started interviewing. I didn't have my license. I had
Mm-hmm.
no sales background, no license. So I'm like, all right. And then in college, I also learned that the fastest way to learn something is to fully immerse yourself in that environment. So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, I decided I want to be a real estate investor. So
Okay.
who the heck is going to hire somebody with no experience?
Right.
I started looking for jobs with like realtors with a background in investing to be like their
Mm-hmm.
assistant, transaction coordinators, and just anybody that would hire me in the real estate world who has an emphasis in investments
Right.
without a license. Interview with a few people, and things didn't work out. On LinkedIn, I saw Gigi Homes,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a mutual friend, a new friend that I had just met, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna like come over for dinner. I'm gonna cook you dinner. And I told him, hey, tell me everything about GG Homes. And they told me like acquisitions company, they fix and flip, they wholesale, they do long-term rentals, they do short-term rentals. I'm like, that's the environment I want to be in.
Exactly.
Like I want to learn from the people who are doing it at a high level.
Mm-hmm.
So he heard me out, and he was already there and well established. He made a call to one of the higher uppers. I got a call like that night, set up an appointment that Friday, and I was hired by the following week through like
Wow.
3 intensive interviews. And I just started as a cold caller, and I
Mm-hmm.
was just banging the phones for a year and a half. I was able to get right around 15 transactions my first year, and just fully immerse myself. I was interviewing the top closers. I was just trying to pick everybody's brain, and I was able to, you know, that. So I'll pause there. So that's how long I stayed at Humble Design. That was my transition from Humble Design to real estate, to working at one of the largest real estate investing firms here in San Diego,
Yeah.
and how I got into real estate. And the way I sum it up is it all started really with books, education and seeking understanding from, all those people who are so kind enough to pour in all their experience into pages that we can all read from.
Right. That's cool, man. That's
Hmm.
really cool. So how long were you with GG Homes? So okay, so hold on. You started out cold calling,
Hmm.
and then did you get promoted?
Yeah, so I was like an associate closer, then agent relations. So, they saw that I was really good with people, and they're like, Manny, we feel like you would be a great representation. Go out there and start building relationships with realtors
Mm-hmm.
because they're a great channel for opportunities as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's just started going to all these real estate meetups, networking with people, letting them know that, hey, we're investors. We're looking to buy more property. And then with that, I made incredible friendships.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I met my lender, Jared Kelly, who helped me
Mm-hmm.
buy an off-market fixer wholesale with an FHA loan. And I was able to use 75,000 to go into renovation all through one loan. Like, who you work with matters,
Yeah.
and people with experience. And it's crazy. That's how I met now our partners now. Well, Paul Burke was also at GG. Mark Pattison I met through the real estate world and networking.
Mm-hmm.
And then that was about, over a year ago. And then fast forward a year, now we're all working together to start Got Fixers. We're about just over around 7 months in,
Yeah.
and it's been an incredible ride. So it's just really cool how fast your life can change when you put yourself out there, you meet people, you treat people right, and and then opportunity comes, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. And you got to
Mhm.
work hard too. I mean,
Right.
there's a lot of hard work that goes into it. I mean, it's not easy, but
Hmm.
if you align yourself with the right people, it can be easier, right?
Right.
It can be an opportunity that can change your life. So, so you bought your first house that was a fixer with an FHA 203K loan.
Nope, just FHA.
Okay, so just FHA, and then
Hmm.
you fixed it up.
Yep. And
Then
it's
what
a
happened?
duplex. So
Okay.
fix it up. I poured most of the upfront costs in the front unit. It was a 4-2. So I Airbnb that unit,
Okay.
and then I live in the back unit with a roommate to maximize my profits.
Right.
And because my favorite strategy is to house hack. And again, I learned that from Bigger Pockets, the books. I'm doing the stacking method.
Okay.
I want to buy a duplex, and then hopefully here in the next 6 months, 12 months, buy another duplex, triplex, or fourplex. And I go from 2 to 4 or 6 doors.
Okay.
And then do that again. You go from now 10 to 14.
Okay.
And then just keep doing that, especially now with the 5% down. And then eventually I want to diversify and buy out of state, keep doing more fix and flips, wholesales, and just until I have my enough number. And, when I have a family like you talked about that earlier, before we started, I too want to be the father that's in the stands at every event. That's why I do what I do. I want to be a present father, and I want to be a present husband, because growing up, even though I love my parents, they weren't very present because they were in survival mode. They just had to keep working to keep food on the table and pay the bills. And I don't want that for myself or my future family.
Yeah, as a kid, I made a promise to myself that I would run my business versus my business running me. And I would make absolutely sure that I made the time for my children. So when my children would look up in the stands, I would be there. My daughter, is it okay if I share something with you?
Of course.
So my daughter was a freshman in college in Los Angeles. And she called me and she said, Dad, I just did a project for one of my classes where I got up in front of everybody and presented our family. And she said, and it dawned on me while I was making this presentation that I needed to call you and tell you something. And I said, what's going on? And she said, my junior year in high school, we were the perfect family. I said, Madison, what makes you say that, right? And she said, well, think about it, Dad. You were on the board of directors of the charter school system in Escondido. You were the announcer of the football team. So when they had their home football games, I'm the guy up in the press box with the microphone doing the play-by-play.
So cool.
She was on the sidelines as a captain on the cheer team, cheering the football team on. My son was the MVP of his basketball team, both his junior and senior year. And my wife was the president of the PBO, the Parent Volunteer Organization, right?
Very involved.
She said, my junior year in high school, we were the perfect family. And so now when I work with young people that are getting married and starting families and doing all that, I tell them that I hope one day that their child calls them and says that to them. Because it was one of the coolest things that's ever happened to me in my life. Okay.
I gave it the goosebumps.
So I interviewed the founder of the charter school system that my children attended and graduated from. And I told him what Madison said. I'm interviewing him for the podcast, got his life story, the whole thing. And I told him what Madison said. And I said, you know what's interesting, Coach, is all of this, every single thing that she mentioned is circles or is surrounded by, and it's connected to your school. So Escondido Charter High School is what all of those things are. Michael was the MVP. She was the captain of the cheer team. I was on the board. I was the announcer. My wife was the president of PBO. Every single thing had to do with Escondido Charter High School. That's what being involved, like we're talking about, that's what that gets you, right? Because you have an opportunity, if you're controlling your time and controlling your schedule, which is where you're headed, you have the time to be able to give back. And when they look up in the stands, you're there.
That's amazing. And
we hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.